Hey, it's Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com, and today I'm going to talk about slope of your gardening bed, of your gardening space, because it matters. Just about any article I've written about choosing the right spot for a garden, I always talk about slope, because if it's too steep, right, you're going to get, water will run down, it'll gain velocity, it'll wash your soil away, wash the nutrients away, or in my case, wash my sand pathways away. So, as a general rule of thumb, a gentle slope, I believe, is 9%. That is the run. The rise is 9% of the run, okay? So, you think about 100% would be 45 degrees, right? 45 degree slope. Where for every distance this way, it's the same distance that way. You definitely don't want that, right? That's like a steep roof on a house. So, as a general rule, you want a 9% slope on your gardening area. Now, where I live, the whole thing's on a slope. In some places, it's steeper than others. So, certain beds, so when you have a slope, you have to, let's say I got a slope like this, it means your beds have to correct for that. They don't have to correct for 100%, but they have to correct for it somewhat if you can, right? Otherwise, you're going to have water, get a really heavy rain like we just had the other day. The goldfish pond in my garden is full right up to the top. We had an amazing rainstorm just the other day. A lot of rain here. And actually, because I've got slope in my garden, some of these pathways, underneath the pathway, I've got a gravel ditch. You can't see it, but there's a trench full of loose gravel with sand on top. That way the water can collect in those and go all the way down at the bottom here. Now, to calculate the slope, it's really easy. You have to have 2 points, okay, where you drive in stakes. You measure the distance between those 2 points, and then you measure the height at the lower point, right? 2 points where one is uphill and one's downhill, okay? You measure the height of the lower one where you draw a string between those 2 points. You find where the string is level at the lower one, and you measure that height. You divide that height by the length, by the distance between the 2 points. Okay, if that's not making any sense, I'm going to show you how to do it. And actually, I got a trick for doing it. It makes it really easy, right? Where we measure a distance of 100. That way the math is simple and we can do it in our head. So let me show you what I'm going to do here. All right, so I got 2 stakes. I'm going to pound one in the ground right here. Okay. And now I'll pound one down lower. But I got to measure the distance. Okay, so I have a string. I'll tie it off to this end here. Just use them whenever you like, that won't move. Right now I'm going to measure off 100 inches. Okay? Try to get as precise as we can, but we don't have to be perfect. Easier if you got 2 people. All right, there's 100. All right, so where it's at 100, we drive a stake in, right there. So I'm going to go in. Okay, that's good enough. Okay, now, let me bring the camera over so you can see what I'm doing. All right, so now all I do is grab my string, and using a level, I'll pull it nice and tight and adjust until I find where it sits level. Which is right about there. Okay, so now I can wrap that around a few times, tie it off, or just wrap it around a bunch of times. Okay, it should hold. All right, now I measure the distance from grade, to the string at the lower stake. So it says it's 10 inches. Okay, that's the distance, 10 inches. Okay. Now the math is easy because it's 100 inches this way, 10 divided by 100, right? It's 0.10, which is 10%. So gentle slope is 9%. I'm 1% over gentle slope, so it's okay, So for all my beds, I like to try to correct that a little bit. I'll show you what I mean. You can see this bed, it's dug in a little deeper on the uphill side than it is on the lower side, right? And most of my beds, that's the case. You can see this one over here, right? Right, it's dug in deeply at the lower end. Sorry, it's dug in deeply at the upper end and not as deep at the lower end. Same with that bed there. On this part of my garden, it's about a percent or two less the case, so it's more like 9 or 8%. All right, so I don't worry too much, but I try to always sort of adjust the beds a little bit, compensate for that. Right? So the more steep your slope is, the more you have to compensate with beds. Otherwise, you just get the water running everywhere, your seeds go everywhere, and it's just, one really good rain can wash your garden away. That's how you calculate slope. You can do it over a longer distance, right? If you want to do the math, just have a calculator, use your phone, right? Whatever the height is where that line is level, you divide that height by the distance between the 2 points from the uphill point and the downhill point, okay? But if you just measure, if you're doing in inches, it's really easy, right? Just measure 100 and then measure the inches of the height, right? 100 in distance and then the inches of the height, and that works out, that just makes the math easy. For metric, of course, 100 centimeters isn't very far, it's just 1 meter, right? So when you're calculating slope, you want to do it over a longer distance if that's possible, where you can calculate the whole slope, right? You can start at the top and go all the way to the bottom, or you can just do little pieces like this. For in most cases, my beds are small, right? They're like 4 by 8 or 8 by 10 or 8 by 8, that sort of thing. So what I need is the place where the bed is to be level. So I don't need to measure the slope of the entire space. And also the slope on my garden is variable anyway. So there's places where it's almost level, and there's places where it's very, very mild, and there's places where it's like this, where it's a 10% slope, which is about as steep as it gets, thankfully, in my garden. Maybe over there it's a little steeper. I'd have to check. But over there I haven't got beds. I've just got trees and stuff like that, and it seems to work out okay, berry bushes and stuff like that. So anyway, if you're putting in a new garden or building new beds, and you want to make sure that runoff and washing out is not a problem in your new gardening space, calculate the slope of the natural terrain, of the natural grade first, and then use your bed construction to adjust for that. And you don't have to adjust it to perfect, and none of mine are. So, it's downhill this way, and most of my beds have a slight slope going downhill. But I adjust it, I gain an inch, right? I put the beds are short by, they're a long end and a short end. So I put the shorter dimension facing uphill, and I tilt the bed a little bit, or just gain an inch, right? Just an inch. That's enough to go from being not gentle to a gentle slope, right? Doesn't have to be perfect. You can waste a lot of lumber and a lot of time and a lot of energy trying to get perfectly level. I mean, if you can, that's great. But you don't have to. It just has to be within that gentle range, 5%, if it makes a lot of difference. If I have to use a whole extra piece of lumber to get 5% as opposed to just being okay with 8%, then I'm okay with 8%. Because lumber costs money. Whatever material you're using, brick or concrete or galvanized steel, whatever you're building your beds out of, right? You don't want to have to go any higher and put any more energy or resources into building beds if you're using beds. And if you're not using beds like I am, it becomes even more important because you really can't compensate that much. You can put your rows perpendicular to the slope, right? And you can mitigate slope issues that way to some extent, but a really good rain, you can still have a washout. Right, so using beds is another good way to deal with slope, but the beds can also compensate for it. So anyway, I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Check out my podcast, maritimegardening.com. Check out my weekly column at maritimegardening.substack.com. And otherwise, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching. Hey folks, if you live in the USA and want to help support the channel, check out the Hudson Valley Seed Company and use my coupon code MARITIME10 to get a 10% discount on whatever you buy. In addition, all seed orders over $35 will get free shipping. They have a great selection of seeds, so maybe give that a try this year, and that'll help support everything I'm doing here. Thanks a lot.